Hi everyone, my name is Oksana, and in this video I'm going to talk about my experience in contributing to GitLab based on one of the issues. I will go over the request in the issue and share the way of how I start investigation of the code base and find the right place in the code that needs to be updated. Then I will demo the changes and show how I created a merge request. Okay, so let's get started with the issue that I was working on. So it is sort admin group list by member count. Based on this description and the screenshot, we can see that there is a page within the admin area called groups. And on this page, admin user can manage the groups on this instance. There is functionality that allows user to sort this list by certain options. And we can see those options here in the screenshot. The request of this issue is to add one more option to this list, particularly to allow user to sort groups by member count. Now let's try to find this page on our local instance. To do so, you need to have GTK installed up and running on your computer. So here is my local host, and let's click on the search or go to, and here at the top of this pop-up we can see admin area. Let's visit this place and let's look for the groups page. Here on the left side we see groups. Let's go there, and we can see that this is pretty much the same page as here in the screenshot. Okay, now let's try to sort this list by any of these options. Let's try with the name. Okay, name descending. So we see that this functionality is working. Okay, now our goal is to add a new option to this list so it can be ordered by the member count. Now we need to find place in the code where this page is rendered and where this particular drop-down is rendered, so that we can add a new option in here and make it visible to the user. So where to start? To start, you need to understand how Rails applications work. You need to know that Rails follows MVC design pattern by convention. And what is MVC? Let me bring this picture and show you that MVC stands for model, view, and controller. Model component, it's everything about data. It writes data to database, it reads data from database, and it validates the data. View component, it's about the representation to the user. It's basically a UI that user can see in the browser. And controller, it's a middleman. It receives user input from the view, then it asks model for the data, and then renders the correct view back to the user according to the user's request. If we go back to our page, so this page is basically a view component in MVC. When we try to select any of these options, let's say name descending, so what it does, it sends a request to the controller, then controller asks for the data in the model, and then returns a new view to the user where we can see this list being sorted by name descending. So now we need to find this controller. There is routing mechanism in Rails and a naming convention for the controllers. The naming convention is to pluralize the last word in the controller name. For example, supplier sites controller, users controller. This naming convention allows the Rails router by default to generate path and URLs for your controller actions. You can still rewrite them though. And when you send a request from particular page, Rails router will recognize this URL and dispatch it to your controller action. Let's examine the URL of this current page. So the last part of it is groups, which means if we follow the convention that there is a controller with the name groups controller. But we can also notice that there is another part before groups, which is admin. It might probably be that there is a namespace called admin, and namespace technically is a folder. And in this case, it might mean that everything that is related to admin area is put under the admin folder. Let's open the project and try to find these folders. Okay, so the main folder where your project is located in Rails is called app, and in this folder you can find another folders for each of the MVC component, and the names are the same. For model there is models, for view there is views, and for controller there is controllers folders. Now we are looking for the controller, right? So let's go to the controllers folder, and as we said, there might be admin folder. So here we can see it. Let's open it and let's find groups controller. Okay, so here it is. Here we can see a bunch of methods, and in Rails these methods inside the controller are called actions, controller actions. And by convention, each of action also maps to a specific CRUD operation in a database. So you can see here is a destroy, update, create, edit, show, so on. So how do we know which action is responsible for our page? So if we take a look at our page, so we see a list of the groups. And in Rails, action that is responsible for displaying a list of objects is called index. So here we can see def index. This is our action that actually renders this view and handles our request. Great, we found controller for our page. So now let's find view. So as I showed you before, all view templates are under views folder. And Rails convention makes it simple and logical. Since our controller name is admin groups controller, it means that there should be a groups folder inside an admin folder. So let's try to find it. Okay, it's our controllers, and here is views, and here we can see admin folder, and here is groups folder. So here we go. There's, you can see a bunch of the html.haml files. How can we know which of those actually renders this page? By default, controller action in Rails renders view template with the same name as an action name, unless it's specified otherwise. So in our case, our controller action is index, and it means that there should be a view template with the same name, index. And here among those files we can see index.html.haml. So let's open this file. Here on the line number 4, we see where the HTML of this page starts. Here is top area class for the div HTML tag. Here we have another ones for the nested div element. On the line number 6, we see helper method, which is called form tag. This helper methods builds HTML for the form. And what is helper methods in general? Helper methods allows you to generate HTML or to extract some complex logic out of the views so that you can organize your code better and make it easier to test. This helper method is built in, but you can also create your own ones, and all the custom helper methods are located under the helpers folder in the app. So here we have app folder, and there is helpers folder. Here you can see all the files, and you may notice that the convention for those helper files is to end them with the underscore helper.rb. Okay, so let's move on. Here we can see another helper method which renders hidden field tag, another nesting in here. Here we have search field tag. Here we have sprite icon rendering. Then we see render of the partial, render of the button, which has label new group, and later we render a list of groups probably. So let's go back to the UI and just align this with the page. Yeah, so here we have search field, we have drop down, we have new group button, and we have a list of groups. So seems to be that's the right view. Okay, but we are interested in our drop down, right? On the line number 12, we render drop down partial. And what partial means? Partials or partial templates in Rails, they allow you to extract piece of code from your views, like part of HTML, to a separate file, and then another view templates can render these partials where it's needed. It also helps you to organize your code, to keep it clean and follow don't repeat yourself principle. Okay, so now let's go and find this partial. Here we see that it's under the shared folder, and there is groups folder, and that's where we need to find it. Okay, so let's go to views and find shared. Okay, here we go, and groups. Here we have drop down partial. As you may notice, convention to name partial is to start with the underscore. But when you render partial in your view template, you don't specify this underscore in here. So we might want to make sure that this is really the right file, that it renders our drop down. We can do it by commenting this file, or we can try to render something. For example, we can try to render h3 hello world. Let's save this file and try to reload the page, see what happens. Cool, so we see this phrase is displayed on this page. Now let's go back and find where we keep all of the sort options of our drop down. Here we have the HTML tag. On the line number 5 we have GL redirect list box tag helper method. We sent 3 arguments into there. First is group sort option, project list sort by, and data HTML attributes. Okay, so let's try to find this method and see what it does. Go to definition. It took us to list box helper file, and inside of it we see that it builds HTML for this drop down. Okay, let's check the arguments. First is items. The second one is selected, so probably that's the selected options from this items list, and HTML options. Okay, so we need to find where we assign the value for this first argument. Let's go back to our partial, and first argument is group sort options variable in here. Okay, let's see what we assign to it. Here we iterate over options hash, and for each option we assign this hash. Okay, and let's find the options hash. Here we are fetching options hash from the local assigns. Okay, but what is local assigns? We see that it's not defined in here. So local assigns is a method in Rails views that returns hash with all the local variables for this partial, and each partial takes these local variables when you render it. If we go back to this index view, here we see render method where we send path to our partial, and here we see this options hash variable, and the value is admin group sort options hash. So this looks to be also helper method. Okay, so now let's go to find this method. Okay, so it took us to certain helper, and here we have group sort options hash, which we merge with this key value pair, sort value largest group and sort title largest group. Okay, and then let's find this method. It's in the same file, and here we see a hash with all the options that we see in our view. Okay, so this is probably the place where we need to add our new one, but let's see how they define all these keys and values. So they seems to be methods as well. Let's go and find them. Okay, so it took us to another helper file, which is sorting titles values helper. Okay, and we see that all of these sort value methods return just a string, and this is probably the code for this particular sort option. In our case, it's latest activity ascending. Okay, and let's go back and check the sort title. It's in the same sorting titles values helper file, and these ones we can see that they return a translated string, all just updated. So it's probably the label that is visible to the user. Okay, so we found this place. We can try to test it with any random strings. For example, let's call like option test, and then let's give some label. Let it be just DDD. Okay, let's save this file and see what happens. This new test option should appear here in the list, in the drop down. Okay, it's reloaded. Let's try and see, and here we go. Here we have our DDD new option. Great, we found view for groups page and place where we can add a new option to have it visible to the user. We found controller that handles requests from this page. The next we need to find is model, place where we retrieve sorted groups from database. So let's go to groups controller and review our index action in details. When we take a look at the line number 11 in our index action, we see that we call sort by attribute method on groups, and we pass one parameter which is called sort, and this parameter we receive from the view. So from this name we can understand that what it does. It returns sorted groups. This method must be defined in the model, and based on what I mentioned at the beginning, all the models are located in the models folder. So let's go to this folder. Here we have models, and the name of this model is group. Let's go and find it. So it is here. Okay, now let's find this method in this file, and here is the place where it's defined. Let's see what this method does. So it receives one argument, which is called method. Here we can see that we have handling of the storage size descending method. We have a comment that explains why we are doing this, and all other methods fall under this else condition. From this comment, we can read that storage size is a virtual column, so we need to pass a string to avoid our adding to the table name. Okay, so from these words we can understand that all these methods are probably columns in the table where we store these groups. So we can try to look at this schema and see if there is any column where we save member count of the group. And here we need to understand that in Rails, to add any changes to database, you need to create and run the migrations. And after you run the migrations, Rails generates file where the current state of your database is captured. And the name of this file can be schema.rb or structure.sql. In those files, you can find all the tables and the columns of those tables. The file and all the migrations can be found under the DB folder. So let's go and try to find it. So we have app, and here we have DB. All the migrations are in these folders, and the schema.rb should be in this DB folder directly. So here we see the structure SQL file. So this is what we need, and we need to find table where we save the groups. In Ruby on Rails, there is another convention that says that the name of the table in the database should be the name of the model in plural. In our case, the name of the model is group, so there should be a table called groups. Let's try to find it. Let's search table groups. Okay, so looks like we don't have it. Okay, let's go back to our model and check the definition of this class. We see that group inherits from namespace. So let's find namespace model. Okay, so this class inherits from application record, which means that there is namespaces table, and in this table we save all the groups. Let's go back to structure.sql file and try to find table with namespaces name. Okay, so here we go, and as we can see right away, here is the name column, which is one of the sort options. And let's try to briefly look through these columns and see if there is anything related to the member count. So looks like there is no such column that contains the value of it. Okay, so if we go back to our group model, to our sort by attribute method, so since there is no such column, we probably need to add our custom logic, the same as we have here for storage size descending method, in order to handle our new option. We identified all the places that we need to update to implement enhancement of this feature. So the first place is this certain helper file where we need to add a new option. The second one is certain title values helper file where we need to add sort value and sort title methods. And the last place is in this sort by attribute method where we need to handle new sort option. Now let me switch to the branch where I have all the code changes. Okay, I switch to the branch. When we go to the UI and click on our drop down, now we see two more options, so sort by members and sort by members descending. When we select to sort by members, we see that the list is getting updated accordingly, and when we select the descending, now the flights should be at the bottom, and we see that it works correctly. Let's go to the merge request and go over the changes that I've made. So you can see that I updated the certain helper file that we found and added two new sort options in here. Also, I changed the certain titles values helper where I added 4 new methods that we use in this certain helper file in here. And also I changed this group model file. You can see that I updated a sort by attribute method in order to handle two new methods, member count ascending and member count descending. And to handle these options, you can see that I call new methods, and these methods are so-called scopes in Rails. And what is scope? Scope is a custom query that you defined in your model, and this scope is defined by scope method, and this method takes 2 arguments. The first argument is the name of your scope that you will use to call it, and the second argument is lambda, and inside lambda you basically implement your query. If you take a look at this query, here I do join of the namespace and group members tables. Then I group by namespace ID and order the list by member count using ascending and descending accordingly. And why I added scopes? I went to check for the implementation of sort by attribute method in other models, and I saw that this is the pattern that they use scopes to handle all these sort options. Let me show you how it looks. If we go to definition of this method in any other model, for example in the issue, so you see that it looks quite the same, and if we search for this order closest future date, you see that this is a scope, right? And if you try to go to another file, for example in this member, we have here orders recent sign in, and this is also a scope. So to be consistent with this implementation throughout the project, I decided to create scopes to handle these new options as well. Let's go back to the merge request. The next file that I updated is called gitlab.pod in the locale folder. Based on the name of this folder, you can understand that these are translation strings. And this file I got updated after I ran a script, which you can find in the GitLab documentation. And that script you need to run every time you change the labels or when you add in a new one. So in my case, I added 2 new labels, members descending and members. So that's why I had to run the script and commit changes to this file. After I made all these code changes, I needed to add some tests to cover new use cases. And in GitLab, all the tests you can find under the spec folder. And how to find the file that contains all the tests to verify your file. So for example, for this certain helper file, there is naming convention that the test file should have the same name as the file you're gonna test, plus it ends with the underscore spec.rb. So in our case, we have certain helper, and here we see that there is a file called certain helper underscore spec, which is under the spec folder. And this convention applies to all the files that you are going to test. So for example, we have changes in our group model, and we have a corresponding spec file, which is called group underscore spec. The same for the controller, we have groups controller spec file, and even for our partial, we also have a spec file. Okay, so after I made changes, I covered them by tests. I went to create merge request. In merge request, I described what this merge request does. I added before screenshot and after screen recording, so it's easier for the reviewer to understand these code changes. And then I added a list of the steps that the reviewer or anyone else can follow in order to test these changes. And I hit create merge request button. After it got created, I received some comments from the danger bot. I find this danger bot quite useful as it can give you some additional information about what you might have missed, about that, for example, you need to add this label. Like in my case, there is one message saying that changes in this merge request require review from database team. And so I needed to add database and database review pending label to this merge request. So what I did. Another thing is, here you see I have one warning, and this warning says that in case you do any new feature, or when you just edit enhancement to the feature, you need to also take care about the documentation. So in my case, I am just enhancement of this feature, and I checked the documentation, and it is quite general for this functionality. The statement is saying that if you want to sort this group list, you can do this. And there is no details about this specific sort option. So I didn't add the changes to the documentation in this merge request. But still, you need to know that in case you do any feature changes, you should care about documentation and ask technical writer team to review those changes. And here at the bottom, you see that there is reviewer roulette, and it provides you a list of reviewers from different category. As you can see in here, it suggests your reviewers from backend and database. And so I assigned reviewers suggested by this roulette to review my merge request. And this is it. Thanks for watching. I hope you will find this useful. To start your contribution journey to GitLab, you can reach out to us on Discord, or you can follow this contribute to GitLab page. So thanks again, and happy contributing.